In her life, Annie Altschul knew fear, loss, and discrimination, but she also experienced happiness, joy, and fulfillment. She was born into a Jewish happy family in Vienna in 1919. It was ironic that after escaping Hitler's invasion of Austria, she became a target of his bombings in London. On escaping to England, she was regarded as an enemy alien, restricted in where she could go and what she could do, and was required to report regularly to the police. As there was a dire shortage of nurses during the war, she opted to train as a general nurse in Epsom in Surrey, an experience she found disagreeable. It was basic wartime care, carried out in a militaristic style, she said. Gypsy women were poorly cared for and discriminated against. Their relatives were frequently refused permission to visit when all they wanted to do was to help. On completing her general course, she immediately commenced psychiatric nurse training at Mill Hill, then an adjunct of the Maudsley Hospital. She instantly felt at home and loved the work. There she witnessed team working, comradeship, scholarship, concern, and compassion, and she directly saw the beneficial effects of human kindness. She immersed herself in the work, developing her understanding of mental health problems, becoming familiar with different forms of intervention, and above all, focusing on what makes good human relationships. In her writing, she often referred to this as the therapeutic relationship or the therapeutic use of self. In seeking to educate herself, she met with and discussed her ideas with some of the foremost thinkers of her time. But most of all, she spent long periods with patients, listening, questioning, and testing out nursing approaches. Her capabilities and potential were soon recognized. She was promoted to the position of ward sister, and shortly afterwards became principal tutor. She undertook a degree in psychology and completed her first book, Psychiatric Nursing, in 1957, followed by Psychology for Nurses in 1962 and Patient-Nurse Interaction in 1972. During this time also, she undertook a year-long study tour of the US, examining approaches to and practices of psychiatric nursing there, and afterwards successfully completed a degree in mathematics. She was appointed Professor of Psychiatric Nursing in 1976 in the then expanding nursing department at Edinburgh University. She was one of the first to be awarded a fellowship of the RCN in 1978, followed by a CBE in 1983 and many other awards. Although she appreciated these honors, she wore them lightly. I became familiar with her work by reading her books and papers, attending conferences, and corresponding with her. She was always generous with her time, encouraging and forthright in her criticisms. I attended her lectures as a student nurse, and she was impressive. I was struck by her teaching style, which was stimulating, inspiring, and thought-provoking. Unlike other tutors, she never wore a white coat. She drew people in, invited their contributions, encouraged them to be critical. You don't become a psychiatric nurse, she used to say, just by hearing about it, reading about it, or thinking about it. The only way is by doing it. She encouraged students and tutors to read critically, to research, to develop self-confidence, and to develop the courage to speak up on behalf of patients. She remained concerned throughout her life about the thousands of institutionalized patients who lived out their empty, monotonous lives in the soulless backwards of psychiatric hospitals. Some, like her, were affected by the war, but unlike her, they became victims in the very place they expected to be helped. I love being with schizophrenic patients, she used to say. They force me to listen, and I cannot help seeing aspects of myself in them. She was instrumental in breaking down divisions, status differences, and resource inequalities within nursing. She was active in getting male nurses to become members of the RCN. She organized conferences and meetings where aspects of psychiatric nursing were discussed and examined. She enticed nurses to write about their work and describe the innovations they were involved in. She advocated better educational opportunities and research training for psychiatric nurses. She brought together highly motivated, competent, and skilled nurses who added considerably to improving the care of psychiatric patients. Furthermore, her students became influential practitioners, researchers, and lecturers. She never expressed hatred, anger, or resentment towards the Nazis, though she lost friends and relatives in the Holocaust. She believed through understanding, forgiveness, and love, one could come to accept people and understand why they behaved in the way they did. She took pleasure in music, art, reading, being with friends, and playing bridge. Nothing gave her more pleasure as she neared the end of her life than having former students and colleagues come together for lunch and conversation. I was pleased when she agreed to be my external examiner when I took my PhD, and I always look forward to visiting her in her flat in Edinburgh. She was a gifted listener, and I never ceased being amazed at the vastness of her knowledge and the depth of her wisdom. I would have liked to have talked to her more about having to leave her home in Vienna, becoming a refugee in England, and being treated as a displaced person. She struggled at times with her own mental health, and she wrote candidly about her time as a psychiatric patient in the book, Wounded Healers. In it, she talked about the help she received from nurses, and equally about the problems she had with some of them. I would have liked to have heard her speak more about why so many psychiatric patients did not improve. She lived out the last years of her life in Scotland, a country she grew to love. Perhaps, she said, because it reminds me so much of my childhood in Austria. A few weeks before her death, a number of her friends and colleagues gathered in Edinburgh to discuss her work, her contribution to nursing, and to thank her for all she had done. At the end of the day, I asked her what she thought of the event. I loved every minute of it, she said, and I loved everyone there. She died peacefully on Christmas Eve, 2001, at the age of 82, cared for by nurses who knew who she was and what she had done. She will be remembered for her humanity, generosity, humility, and sense of fun. She acquired much from learning, research, and attending seminars, but she learned much more from life, and particularly her early life. She touched the lives of many, and they in turn touched the lives of many more. Though she has left a void, she remains a presence. My wish is that future generations will benefit from who she was and what she did. Thank you.